Welcome, traveler. They say a samurai fears nothing, but in the quiet moments before dawn, even the bravest warrior listens for ghosts. Those found in steel, in silence, and in the stories that refuse to die. Before we learn more about the samurai, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Now, let's journey together. Imagine a quiet morning in 17th century Japan, mist hanging over an earthen courtyard. You awaken to the gentle clink of wooden sandals on gravel, a soft rustle of silk, and the faint scent of incense. Dawn breaks over a low, thatched roof. Steel sings in the softest breeze. This is no mythic warrior, but a man bound by ancient honor, who tenderly sharpens his blade at daybreak, not for glory, but to honor his lord and wipe away the dust of yesterday. Welcome to the real life of a samurai. Its origins, birth, and family life. Your story begins at birth into a bushy household. The name samurai means those who serve. And from childhood, you understand, your family serves a daimyo, a feudal lord. This is your lineage, your purpose. At 13, you formally enter training. By age 15, you might face your first battle. Your home is austere, tatami mats, polished wooden floors, sliding paper doors. Meals are modest, rice, pickled vegetables, but prepared thoughtfully. You bow to your elders, learn calligraphy, poetry, and court etiquette long before swords. The daily discipline of Bushido, your day begins before sunrise. You step into the courtyard and bow low toward your lord's residence. You begin your physical training, striking bamboo poles, practicing kata, meditating on breathing. You repeat familiar drills, sword in sheath, sword drawn, movement as water, each motion exact, rhythmic. Bushido, the way of the warrior, is your compass. Loyalty, courage, rectitude, respect, sincerity, honor, and self-control. It's a book of 5 rings and classic texts like Hokakure. It's written in the early 1700s by Yamamoto Tsunetomo. I teach that a samurai lives as if already dead, maintaining quiet awareness that death may arrive at any moment. Many samurai also practice Zen meditation, cultivating calm focus and emptying the mind. This spiritual discipline underpins your physical skills. Armor, weapons, and ritual. You don your light lacquered armor, lamellar plates stitched in hemp, and secure the daisho. It's a pair of swords, the long katana and the short wakizashi. The katana is your partner, your soul's reflection. You clean it meticulously each day, oiling it and wiping fingerprints. Discipline shaping steel. In official capacity, only samurai can carry 2 swords, symbols of your caste identity. The wakizashi accompanies you, even in peaceful settings. If dishonor strikes, it may serve in ritual seppuku, the solemn act of suicide to atone for failure, considered more honorable than shame. The shifting roles of the warrior in the early Edo period. Following the end of major civil wars around 1600, Japan enters 2 centuries of peace. As bloodshed recedes, your role shifts. You are no longer frequently at war, but you remain vigilant. Many samurais become administrators, bureaucrats, scholars, or quietly resentful of idle ritual. You might serve in castle administration, tax collection, or managing rice stores. Others teach martial arts to students, or focus on cultural arts like tea ceremony, poetry, or calligraphy. Yet, your code remains fidelity to your lord, even if that lord is peace, not war. A glimpse of real lives. Katsuko Kichi's diary. Allow me to introduce Katsuko Kichi, a low-ranking samurai of Edo-era Japan, whose diary reveals a life far removed from romantic myth. In the early 19th century, he writes of debts, gambling, wandering, the constant pressure of living within a rigid social hierarchy. He confesses fear, embarrassment, and reliance upon occasional schemes to pay debts. But even he cleans his sword, bows at dawn, and continues his duty. His honesty reveals that not all samurai were honorable samurai in legend. but all wore the same swords, all feared dishonor, all lived by the same code. Legendary Rosen. The 47 Ronin now lean inward as I whisper one of history's most poignant tales. In 1701, your lord, Asano Nagano, is forced to commit seppuku after drawing his sword and assaulting a corrupt court official. You and 46 comrades become Ronin, masterless, and carry deep shame. Over 14 long months, you secretly plan. You adopt drunken acts of dissipation to lull suspicion, and then, in the winter of January 1703, you march to Kira's estate. At the break of dawn, you strike and execute revenge for your master. Afterwards, you turn yourselves in and are ordered to commit seppuku as a final act of honor, fate embraced with unwavering determination. In the hush, after, your story becomes legend, an embodiment of loyalty, patience, sacrifice, and courage. These are not myths. They are real men who reshaped Bushido for generations. Foreign faces in samurai worlds. Yasuke and William Adams. You may think samurai were solely Japanese, and yet history records two remarkable exceptions. Yasuke, an African man who arrived in Japan in 1579 with Jesuit missionaries, caught the eye of warlord Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga tested whether his skin was dyed. When he realized Yasuke was not a slave and stood over 6 feet tall, Ki made him a samurai, a retainer, bearing Nobunaga's 2 swords. Meanwhile, William Adams, an English pilot who shipwrecked in Japan in 1600, earned favor with Tokugawa Ieyasu and eventually became Hatamoto, a direct retainer, and received samurai status, lands, a residence, and 2 swords. In their stories, you glimpse that samurai identity was not only blood and birth, but loyalty, service to a lord, and adoption of Bushido ideals. Evening rituals, reflection, and tea. As sun dips low, you return to your residence. For supper, you wash hands and mouth in ritual purity. You sit quietly with family, children reciting poems they learned, and you review official scrolls or write letters. You may host a tea ceremony, a slow, deliberate pouring of matcha in precise gestures that merges discipline and art. Movement is silent, the mind attentive. This calm is both rest and training. After dinner, you retire to your room. You lay out your katana beside your pillow, metaphor and reminder that duty never sleeps. You recite silently the words of Hagakure. A warrior should die every day, meaning to live each day as though it may be your last. You close your eyes, breath slow, letting the weight of steel at your side lull you into rest. Reflection. You have met the boy who was born to serve, the man whose life is shaped by ritual, training, loyalty, tension, art, and sometimes despair. You have seen distant legends, the 47 Ronin, rare exceptions, Yasuke, William Adams, and personal cracks in the ideal Kasu Kokichi. All these pieces form the mosaic of what life was really like. In the next installment, we'll follow one samurai, your own avatar, through a turning point, a battlefield or a political shift, a test of loyalty, and the quiet heartbreak of the changing world as the Meiji era dawns. This ASMR-like narration will continue to guide your mind gently toward deeper rest. Twilight Steel. The burden of peace, the night air was cool in Tosa province. A cicada song drifted in and out like a dream, and the lantern's glow danced softly across your tatami floor. You rose early, even before the crows had stirred. This day, something was different. A samurai named Sakamoto. Your name is Sakamoto Ryoma. It is the year 1862, and Japan is teetering between eras. You are born of the low samurai class in Kochi, in the southern region of Shikoku Island. And like your father, you see the world beyond swords. From an early age, your peers mock your stutter and your soft spirit, but you study swordsmanship with diligence, eventually earning a license in Hakushin Itoru, one of the strongest styles in Japan. Still, you feel the air shifting. Something stirs inside you, a longing not for battle, but for change. In Edo, now Tokyo, You join a progressive movement. Though raised to serve a daimyo without question, you find yourself challenging the very foundation of the samurai caste. It is an act of quiet rebellion and impossible courage. The internal struggle of Bushido. You begin to ask questions you were never meant to ask. What if loyalty to a corrupt lord is not true honor? What if peace demands disobedience? In this, you echo the teachings of reformers and rebels. You cross paths with men like Kido, Takeyoshi, Seigo Takamori, and Kasu Kasher, who, like you, vision a future where samurai are not bound to blind tradition, but to the soul of Japan itself. Still, you polish your sword. Still, you bow to your elders. Still, you write poetry in the evenings, but your feet are already walking into the wind of a coming storm. The Meiji Restoration, the world outside. First foreign ships. You remember the first time the black ships came. In 1853. The American Commodore Matthew Perry steamed into Edo Bay with 4 massive warships and demanded that Japan open its ports. The sight of smoke and steel shook the Tokugawa shogunate. For over 250 years, Japan had isolated itself under the Sakoku policy. Now, that wall was cracking. You watched your elders debate. Some called for resisting the foreigners. Others whispered of opportunity. For you, it is a revelation. The world is vast. The samurai are no longer the apex of civilization. Guns, steam, factories, all these will soon render your katana ceremonial at best. A letter in a choice one autumn evening. You sit by candlelight, reading a letter from Katsu Kaisher. He has arranged for you to meet with the shogun's ministers. His dream, peaceful transition. No more bloodshed between imperial loyalists and the shogunate. Your hands tremble. You set down the letter and gaze at your blade. Sword your father polished. The blade your ancestors carried at Sekigahara, at Osaka Castle, at Edo's gates. Will you now wield it to protect peace? You rise. You place the katana in its lacquered sheath. You write your response by hand, ink thick with resolve. I will work toward unity. Japan must awaken. The hidden rooms of Kyoto. The years pass like mist through pine trees. You travel to Kyoto, the old imperial capital, a city of winding alleyways and secret alliances. There, in the shadows of Nijo Castle, you meet with other samurai who have chosen vision over vengeance. You wear western boots under your hakama, speak of industry, of steamships, of railways, of equality. Dangerous words for a man of your station. Okay, and yet your voice is heard. Okay, you are a samurai, and still there is honor in your bearing. In one meeting, you present a bold plan. The Sacho Alliance, a secret pact between the powerful Satsuma and Chacha domains to dismantle the shogunate and restore imperial rule. They listen, they agree. History shifts in a room lit by flickering lanterns and the quiet rustle of robes. Farewell to the old sword. It is early spring when you walk again in Tosa, your homeland. Cherry blossoms drift down like memories. Children practice with wooden swords in the courtyard. You pause by the dojo where you once trained. You watch the boys laugh, strike, stumble, bow. Later that evening, you stand in your family's garden. You draw your katana, polish it once more, but this time you wrap it carefully, respectfully, and place it into a wooden chest. For the first time in generations, the sword will rest. This is not defeat, it is transcendence. You walk back inside. You write new words on new scrolls. Words of unity. Words of reform. The final ambush. But peace is not born without pain. In 1867, the shogunate collapses. You help negotiate the peaceful handover of power to Emperor Meiji. You are hailed as a hero of the new Japan. Yet old ways die hard. In 1868, you are staying at the Omiya Inn in Kyoto. It is night. Rain taps gently on the roof. You are relaxed, unarmed, sharing tea with your companions. Suddenly, the paper door bursts open. Assassins. You reach instinctively for your blade, but it is not there. You were cut down by the swords of men who could not bear the world you were trying to build. Your blood seeps into the tatami. Your final breath is calm. History will remember you. You were the last true samurai, not because of your skill with the sword, but because you sacrificed it for a better Japan. Epilogue. The sword and the scroll. And now we drift forward. Okay, it is 1876. A new law bans samurai from wearing swords in public. The katana is no longer a right, but a relic. Railroads stretch like veins across the land. Factories hum with iron and coal. Children wear uniforms instead of hakama. The samurai class, your class, vanishes, but not entirely. Bushido lives on. In ways of tea, of art, of honor, and business. Hang kendo halls, in classrooms, in the quiet discipline of a craftsman, in the reverence for ancestors and the pursuit of harmony. Your sword is sheathed, but your spirit moves still to the hush of dawn, the weight of silence, the strength in surrender. The samurai did not disappear. They became Japan itself. Blades in the morning fog, the boy on the battlefield. Minamoto no Yoshitsune, let us travel back. Far, far before Ryoma's modern dreams. The century is the 12th, and Japan is torn between two great clans, the Taira and the Minamoto. In the quiet mountain temple of Karama, a boy awakens to the sound of chanting monks. His name is Minamoto no Yoshitsune, son of a disgraced general. He is small, delicate, and quick, more fox than bear. Akira killed his father during the Heiji Rebellion, Kana, and so the boy was hidden away among Buddhist monks to protect his bloodline. But even as a child, he would practice swordplay under the temple trees, light on his feet, fast as falling rain. By 16, he is no longer a monk. By 20, he becomes legend. 18. War and wind on the plains of Denora. You are Yoshitsune now. You ride into the Genpei War alongside your half-brother, Yoritomo, leader of the Minamoto. The war will decide the fate of Japan and give birth to the first shogunate. Your army clashes with the Taira across mountains and rivers, through fog and flame. But it is in 1185, on the waves of the straits of Shimonoseki, where destiny unfolds, the Battle of Danowara. You command the naval assault. Your archers fire in perfect unison. Taira ships burn. The emperor, just a boy, is thrown into the sea by his grandmother to avoid capture. It is tragic, beautiful, terrible. The Taira are no more. It's a bitter price of glory. You return home not to celebration, but suspicion. Your brother, Yoritomo, now shogun, sees your brilliance as a threat. Despite all you gave, you were hunted, labeled a traitor, forced into hiding. In the mountains of northern Japan, you were betrayed by the very warlords you once helped. Surrounded at Koromagawa no Tate, you commit ritual suicide rather than be captured. Some say your last words were, "Even 1,000 arrows cannot pierce the spirit of a loyal heart." Your body is found kneeling, hair tied, kimono, perfect. You die as you lived, still, dignified, serene. To this day, temples still burn incense in your name. The sound of bamboo, Miyamoto Musashi. Now we walk further into the 17th century, an era of quiet after centuries of war. But not all warriors seek rest. In the cool mountain mist of Kyushu, a man awakens alone in a cave. Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the most famous swordsman to ever live. He fought his first duel at the age of 13, killing a grown man with a wooden sword. He never lost. Duel at dawn. Ganrijima, let me whisper you into his most famous battle. The year is 1612. The island, Ganrijima. Its opponent, Sasaki Kajiro, the demon of the west. Master of the Manahoshizayo, a long, thin sword known as the drying pole. They agreed to duel at dawn. Musashi arrives hours late, rowing himself across the water, using a wooden oar he carved into a crude sword. High steps ashore, unwashed, wild-haired, eyes like still pools. Kajiro is angered, poised, elegant. The duel begins. It ends in moments. Musashi strikes once. Kajiro falls. The ore splits. Wisdom in the cave. Musashi retires from dueling. He walks the land, teaching, painting, and studying Zen. In his final years, he retreats to a cave, Rigondo, where he writes the Book of Five Rings. He speaks not only of combat, but of philosophy. There is timing in everything. Timing and strategy cannot be mastered without a great deal of practice. The true science of martial arts means practicing them in such a way that they will be useful at any time, and to teach them in such a way that they will be useful in all things. You feel the weight of these words, not as battle cries, but as meditations. His legacy is not victory, it is awareness. A day in the castle, but not every samurai was a general or a duelist. For most, life was quieter, structured, ritualistic, slow. Let us visit a nameless castle in the Tokugawa era, Atiz, 1754. You are a mid-level retainer. Your duty today is not to fight, but to supervise the storage of rice and ensure fair collection from peasants. You rise early. You bow to the morning sun. You record ledgers by brush and ink. You wear your daisho, not for battle, but to remind others and yourself of who you are. You study the Analects of Confucius. You recite waka poetry. You drink thick, frothy matcha in silence, kneeling on woven mats. And at night, you write letters in neat cursive, asking your son to study hard and honor his ancestors. The blade remains on the shelf, but the heart of a samurai still beats beneath your robes. It's a coming fire. Satsuma Rebellion. Before we rest, let us gently return to the year 1877. One final time, the Satsuma Rebellion has begun. Led by Saigo Takamori, once a loyal servant of the Meiji Emperor, the last samurai rise in defiance. They wear armor against rifles, ride horses against trains. It is hopeless. They know this, but they fight not to win, but to leave one final imprint upon the soul of Japan. Their final stand at Shiroyama is thunderous. Gunpowder and cannonballs shatter silence. And when the smoke clears, Seigo falls, not to fear, but with dignity. The samurai, as a class, are gone, but Japan, reborn, will carry their memory forever. Echoes in the ink, the afterlife of the samurai's brush. In a quiet tatami room in Kanazawa, a former retainer kneels beside his inkstone. The wars are gone, but his training endures. His name is lost to history, but his calligraphy remains. For centuries, samurai were not only warriors, but also poets, scholars, and artists. The pen, they believed, refined the sword. To write was to calm the hand, to sharpen the mind. In fact, the famed samurai Hosokawa Tadayoki, a vassal of Oda Nobunaga, studied tea ceremony and wrote poems for his wife Gracia, a Christian convert who died in defiance of political hostage taking. Another, Takwansar, a Zen monk, taught that a mind that does not dwell in the past or future is the mind of the warrior. His writings guided swordsmen like Yagi Munenori, who trained Tokugawa shoguns not only in killing, but in clarity. So now, in this quiet moment, brush in hand, you are not preparing for war. You are practicing the art of presence. Kendo, the ghost of the blade. The Meiji government abolished the samurai class in the 1870s, but the spirit of the sword remained. It took a new form. Kendo, the way of the sword. By the 20th century, Kendo became part of school training, just as the sword once trained the soul. Now it disciplines students. You enter a modern DJ. You bow low, step on the polished wood, and don your armor. You grip the bamboo shinai, the surrogate for the blade your ancestors once carried. Every strike is a whisper of the past. You do not fight to defeat, but to perfect form. Kwai. The sudden shout pierces the silence. A strike lands. Kwai. But you do not celebrate. You bow again, because Kendo is not about the enemy. It is about the self, tea, and steel. In the mountains of Uji, a centuries-old tea house remains. 8. Roof, moss-covered. Its sliding doors, smooth with age. Inside, a former samurai family still prepares tea. Koya Chado was practiced by many samurai, perhaps none more famously than Sen no Rikya, tea master to the powerful warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Rick could taught humility through simplicity. Cracked bowls were more beautiful than flawless ones. Every movement in the tea room, every bow, every scoop of powder was performed with full attention. Rikyu's teachings would shape samurai minds as much as any blade. In fact, Hideyoshi would one day order Riku's death, yet still honor him in ceremony. In this quiet tea room, a truth lingers. Sometimes, stillness is the greatest strength. It's the forgotten women of the samurai. Not all warriors were men. So let us remember the Onabageisha, female warriors of samurai families. Tomo Gassen, in the late 12th century, rode into battle in the Jinpei War. She wore armor, wielded a katana, and beheaded enemy generals. She was called beautiful, fearless, and skilled with bow and blade. Centuries later, Nakano Takako, in 1868, led an all-female unit during the Boshin War, armed with the Naginata pole weapons and dressed in hakama. She died in combat, requesting her sister to behead her to prevent desecration. Their stories are whispered in temples, recorded in forgotten scrolls, carved into local shrines. They were mothers, daughters, and warriors. The samurai spirit knew no gender, only courage. In the shadow of Hiroshima now, we drift forward into a darker, quieter century, a 20th. In 1945, after World War II, Japan lay in ashes. The old ways were forbidden. Bushido, long romanticized, had been twisted by wartime propaganda. But in the shadow of Hiroshima, something unexpected occurred. In ruined towns, old men began teaching again, not violence, but principle. They reopened dojos. They polished swords long buried. They showed young boys how to bow, to breathe, to cut not with hatred, but with clarity. The war had misused Bushido, but these men restored its soul. The last swordsmiths today, only a handful of traditional swordsmiths remain in Japan. Men like Yoshindo, Yoshihara, 10th generation master, work in silence. Their workshops echo with ancient rhythms. Fire, hammer, fold, quench. Each blade takes months. Every strike carries centuries. They do not forge weapons for killing. Their swords are spiritual. A modern katana may never leave its scabbard, but still, it is cared for, revered, like a shrine. Sword has become a mirror. You do not draw it to cut your enemy. You draw it to see yourself. Bushido today. So where's Bushido now? Is in the DJ, in the child tying their obi, in the calligrapher's stroke, in the bow before a match, in the executive who leads with humility, in the soldier who does not take joy in war. It is in quiet discipline, courage without pride, honor without applause, loyalty without chains. You may never wear armor, you may never hold a blade, but in your patience, your purpose, your willingness to act rightly, especially when no one is watching, you carry the echo of the samurai, closing the scroll, and now the scroll of our story draws to a close. You've walked the path of a boy, in the temple of a warrior, in the storm of a rebel, in boots of a woman, with the naginata of a monk, with the brush of a modern man making tea in silence. The samurai are not gone. They sleep in the mountain mist. They whisper in the rustle of bamboo. They wait in the ink of forgotten poems. And sometimes, when the world grows too loud, you can find them again in stillness, in your breath, in your quiet courage. Inheriting the silence, legacy of the samurai spirit, the inheritance of still hands. Imagine you are a child again. This time in the Tachio era, early 1900s Japan. Your grandfather, now old and silver-haired, sits beside you in a garden of moss and koi. He is not boastful. He does not speak of war, but he speaks with presence. He once served as a castle guard, never drew his sword in battle, but woke before dawn each day to polish armor, study poetry, and instruct young lords. He tells you how your ancestors rode beneath the banners of Tokugawa and Hosokawa, and then he reaches for a box. Inside rests a sword. The blade is centuries old. The hammer, the wave-like temper line along the steel, shimmers faintly in the sunlight. He shows you how to clean it, how to bow before touching it. Not because it is a weapon, but because it is a memory made tangible, a spirit in steel. It's a samurai's funeral in the Meiji period. As the last generation of true samurai pass on, funerals become moments of reverent ritual. Some still follow Shinto, others adopt Zen or even Christianity, but in each, the essence remains the same: respect, silence, simplicity. At a samurai's funeral, the sword often rests beside the casket, not as a weapon, but as a companion. It is said that the soul of the samurai resides within the blade. You stand beneath the eaves of the temple, incense drifting past your nose. You bow twice, clap once, bow again. No words are spoken. But in that stillness, the memory of a life lived with purpose hangs in the air. Rituals of renewal, seppuku, and yet not all rituals were peaceful. There was once a rite called seppuku, ritual suicide performed to preserve honor when all else failed. It's misunderstood in the West as simply gruesome. But to the samurai, it was an act of ultimate clarity. A samurai would kneel, dressed in white, a blade placed before him. Witnesses would gather. A second, called a kishakunin, stood beside, often a close friend, prepared to offer a swift beheading to end the suffering immediately after the abdominal cut. There was no trembling, no pleading, only acceptance. It was not death they sought, but control over how they met it. In this, Bushido revealed its final vow: to die with the same calm with which one lived. Bushido and the modern code. Though the samurai caste was dissolved, the Bushido spirit was not. In the 20th century, authors like Naitobe Inazu published Bushido, the Soul of Japan, explaining samurai virtues to Western readers: honesty, frugality, loyalty, self-sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of duty. Business leaders adopted its principles. Martial artists enshrined it in kata and rank. Even soldiers, doctors, and monks referenced Bushido as a guiding code. But it was no longer about swords. It became about how to live in chaos with grace. How to remain steady when the wind howls. How to choose integrity when it costs you. How to remain still, even in motion. The warrior monk and the garden path. Let us walk once more, this time into a Zen monastery, deep in the mountains near Nara. A former samurai, now a monk, tends a rock garden in silence. He arranges the stones with perfect symmetry. He brushes the gravel into slow, raked patterns, waves, ripples, silence. You ask him what he's doing. He replies softly, moving mountains without leaving the garden. And then he pours tea. In his movements, you notice the same grace a swordsman once used to strike. But now, there is no enemy, only stillness. The samurai's daughter, we shift again, gently, to a quiet home in the 1920s. A girl is born to a family with samurai ancestry. Her father no longer wears a topknot or carries a sword. He works in an office in Tokyo, but each morning he folds his uniform with exact creases. He bows before leaving the house, speaks softly. When he writes, it is with beautiful brushwork. When he listens, it is with complete presence. He tells her one evening of her great-grandfather, who served Lord Nabishima. He shows her a blade, sheathed and silent. She runs her fingers along the lacquer, marveling at the faded family crest engraved near the hilt. She grows to be a teacher, a gentle disciplinarian. Her students remember not her rules, but her honor. And so, the line continues. Not by blood alone, but by example. The sword in the mirror in your own life. perhaps modern, digital, urban, you may still encounter echoes of this path. When you hold your ground calmly in the face of injustice, when you act with kindness, even when no one sees, when you honor your word, even when it's hard, when you finish what you start with discipline and care. In those moments, you are not far from the old warriors. You are holding a mirror. Somewhere in that reflection, the blade gleams, sleeping blades. And so, we return once more to the cave. The blade rests inside its scabbard. The ink on the scroll has dried. The lantern dims, but you, dear listener, have walked the path. You have seen the world of the samurai, not in movie flashes or myths, but in whispers, rituals, and truths. From the boy in Karama Temple to the general at Dan Aurora. From the brush of Musashi to the courage of Tamo Gozen. From the fall of Seigo to the quiet tea masters of today. The samurai was never just a warrior. He was a father, a poet, a gardener, a woman on horseback, a student bowing before a lesson, and now a story being whispered to you. So sleep now. Let the mountains cradle you. Let the sword dream in peace. A day in the life. Across the ages, a samurai's day in 1100. The Heian twilight. The year is 1100. Japan is at the twilight of the Heian period, a time of elegance and poetry, but also growing unrest. You are a samurai in the service of a noble Fujiwara lord in northern Honshu. Your estate lies near the forested edge of civilization. 4:30 a.m., incense and morning watch. You rise with the sun, or slightly before, serving lights incense in the corner of your thatched residence. You kneel in prayer, facing east. Outside, the frost clings to bamboo. You walk the perimeter of your estate with your sword tucked into your robe, feeling the silence of the trees. The borders of your land are always at risk of bandits or rival clans. 7 a.m., breakfast and letters. A bowl of rice, grilled fish, and mountain vegetables. Your children bow to you before sitting. A courier arrives. A message from Kyoto. Rumors of Taira and Minamoto clashes in distant provinces. You frown slightly. War may come. 10 a.m., archery practice in sword kata. You dan armor for training, not for battle. You release arrows into straw targets, practicing horseback archery or yabasami later. The sword is less refined at this stage, still curved but rougher than later katana. You favor the bow. You practice kenjutsu patterns with your retainers, each strike like a falling leaf, measured, silent, patient. 1 p.m., temple visit and scrolls. You ride to a nearby temple, offering rice and coins. A monk recites sutras for your ancestors. You return to read poetry minutiae, or the tale of Genji, beautiful and slow. As a warrior, your literacy reflects your worth. 7 p.m., evening watch and tea. Your guards patrol the perimeter. You sip tea in quiet. A lute player strums softly nearby. You clean your short blade, the tanto, by candlelight, rubbing the steel with oil and silk. Before sleep, you bow again to your ancestral altar. In 1100, the samurai was not yet the dominant political power, but he was rising. His loyalty, landholding, and protection defined his world. A samurai's day in 1500. Sengoku storms. The year is 1500, the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. Civil War defines Japan. You serve a powerful daimyo. Your castle lies on a forested ridge near Kyoto. Your life is tension and ritual in equal parts. 5 a.m., armor and meditation. You wake in a fortified compound. Q, dun-layered armor, lacquered, ornate, worn with pride. You meditate briefly on impermanence, preparing for any call to battle. 9 a.m., strategic meeting. You meet with fellow samurai in a war room. A sketched map lies on the floor. You debate troop movement. Reports of a rival clan's advance disturb your daimyo. You may ride at dawn tomorrow. 11 a.m., marshal drills your men train. You inspect their spear formation. Later, you spar with wooden bakken Informal duels. Bruises form. No one complains. Honor is everything. It's 5 p.m. to tea. With the Lord your daimyo hosts a Chano-yu tea ceremony. You kneel in his private garden. The sound of wind through pine. Teas. You bow deeply, grateful to still be alive. 7:30 p.m. Letter to your wife. You write by candlelight in careful calligraphy, describing a sakura tree that bloomed by the moat. You end the letter. If I fall in battle, burn this blade with me. In 1500, the samurai was defined by war. Every day could be his last. And yet poetry, etiquette, and serenity endured within the chaos. A samurai's day in 1800, the autumn of peace. The year is 1800, deep within the Edo period. Tokugawa rule has brought peace for over 200 years. You are a low-ranking samurai in a castle town in Kyushu. You no longer fight, but serve as a bureaucrat, a teacher, and a symbol of tradition. 6 a.m. Scrolls in scripture. You begin the day with a passage from the Analects of Confucius. You bow to a wooden shrine for your ancestors, placing fresh water and rice before it. 9 a.m. office work. You report to the castle's administrative building. Today, you handle disputes about rice taxes and merchant licenses. Your dasho, your 2 swords, hang at your hip, but they are ceremonial. Your ink brush is mightier now than any spear. 12 p.m. Simple lunch and tea. Pickled radish, miso soup, rice. You eat quickly, then walk the gravel path beside the koi pond. You recite haiku under your breath, counting syllables on your fingers. 4 p.m. Teaching young samurai. You teach 5 boys sword etiquette and classical Chinese poetry. They bow with precision. Not to fight, you tell them, but to be strong enough not to. 8 p.m. Stillness. At home, your wife plays a koto softly. Okay. You sip sake, watching the night sky. You wonder if your blade will ever leave its sheath again, and then you smile. You hope it never will. In 1800, the samurai was a symbol. Though many struggled financially, they carried the pride of 1,000 years on, the peaceful strength of restraint. Now, let us move forward with a tale, a fictional story built entirely on historical truths. A multi-generational account of a samurai family's rise, fall, and quiet legacy. This story will gently unfold over the next batches, each one focusing on a different member of the family. Their lives will connect like brushstrokes on parchment. Let us begin. The House of Asayama, the First Blade. Asayama no Tanahira, 1180. Our story begins in the province of Shinano in the year 1180 as war consumes Japan. Young Tanahira is the second son of a minor noble. He dreams not of poetry, but of battle. When the Minamoto rise against the Taira, his family pledges allegiance to Minamoto no Yoritomo. Tanahira earns his first scar at age 16 on the slopes of Mount Usukushigara. He survives, barely. In 1185, at the naval battle of Danawara, he watches a child emperor vanish beneath the sea. He returns home hardened, quiet. He marries, builds a small manor, hangs his blood-stained armor on the wall, never worn again. To his sons, he says, the blade is not for pride, it is for peace. The Asayama name begins here, as a scholar. Asayama no Yoshinobu, 1435. Generations pass, okay? In 1435, amid the Ashikaga shogunate, young Yoshinobu grows up in the quiet hills of Mikawa. He does not take easily to swordplay, but shines with ink and verse. He studies in Kyoto, walking the halls of Jinkakuji, the silver pavilion, where monks teach him wabi-sabi, beauty and imperfection. He returns home and opens a dojo, teaching both iajutsu, the art of drawing the sword, and waka poetry. He dies without ever seeing battle, but his students speak his name for generations. The Dissolution, Asayama no Kato, 1869. Kato, Sayama, is born into a world that no longer needs samurai. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration begins. In 1869, his father removes his swords. The stipend vanishes. The house must sell land. Kato leaves for Tokyo. He becomes a postal clerk. And yet, every morning before work, he kneels before his father's katana, still sharp, and bows. In his diary, he writes, "My sword is silent, but it is not forgotten." He dies quietly in 1917. His grandson, Kenji, finds the blade beneath floorboards after an earthquake. The blade is sheathed, still oiled, still waiting. The blood of silence. The Isayama line endures the craftsman. Kenji Isayama, 1925. Kenji was born in Tokyo in the year 1900, in a small house that leaned against a weeping willow. His father was quiet, a postal clerk. His mother wore the same blue kimono every day, folded neatly at night. He never saw a blade drawn. A Kanda earthquake in 1923. Kenji helped clear debris near his grandfather's old home. Neath warped beams, his hand brushed something wrapped in silk. The sword, the Izama katana, its edge shimmered even in the dust-choked air. He did not lift it, he only bowed. Years later, in 1925, Kenji became a shokunin, a traditional woodworker, specializing in kiri tansu, Japanese chests with hidden compartments. He did not speak much. His work was his speech. He carved family crests into drawer faces. He joined temples in silence. And every year, on the anniversary of the quake, he would visit the blade, unwrap it, oil it, and whisper, "I carry you in my hands." When war came in the 1930s, he refused to make boxes for the military. "Let others carry bullets," he said. "I will carry grain. I will carry memory." Kenji died in 1970. His tansu chests became heirlooms. His silence became legend. And the sword was passed again. The teacher, Emiko Izayama, 1984. Born in 1950, Emiko was the first daughter of the Isayama line to inherit the family sword. A curious child, she asked early, "Why do we keep a sword if we never use it?" Her mother, pouring tea, smiled gently. "Because it is not a sword anymore. It is a mirror." Iko grew into a writer. She studied literature at Kyoto University, then returned home to teach high school Japanese. Her classroom was simple. One scroll hung near the blackboard. It read, "Irir Shan, one good deed a day." She taught her students more than grammar. She taught presence, grace, pausing before speaking. Each year, she read her students a translated passage from Hagakure, even if one's head were to be suddenly cut off. He should still be able to perform one more action with certainty. And then she would say, softly, "Live every moment with that kind of care, that kind of love." In 1984, when her father died, she found the sword again in its silk wrap. She didn't bow. She hugged it. The Breaking Kazuo Izayama, 2011. Kazuo, Emiko's son, was not interested in the past. He grew up with manga, pop music, neon, and noise. The sword to him was a strange family relic, just a symbol of something boring, obsolete, irrelevant. He became an architect in Tokyo. His life moved in grids, deadlines. But in 2011, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami shattered the coast. His firm sent him to assess damage in the north. One town, Ishinomaki, was gone. He walked among the wreckage. And in one half-collapsed home, he saw a family altar, covered in soot, but unbroken. On it lay a katana, not his family's, but someone else's. Yet still, he wept. He returned to Tokyo different, quieter. He visited his mother, asked about the family blade, and for the first time, he held it. His reflection shimmered into steel. He did not feel pride. He felt responsibility. That night, he dreamed of pine forests, of men in armor standing in fog, of poets writing by lantern light, of a young woman teaching haiku to giggling children, and he awoke calm. The world would still buzz and spin, but he would move through it slowly, like a samurai, the present Akari Isayama today. Akari is your age. She lives in the city, but dreams of mountains. K. She has never drawn a blade, but practices kendo every Thursday evening in a quiet DJ tucked between bookstores. She works in a hospital. She says kindness is her sword. She reads Musashi's book of 5 rings on the train. She bows before entering every room. She never speaks unless fully present. She owns a small garden where she grows moss and plum blossoms, and in a chest made by Kenji, she keeps the family katana, still sheathed, still oiled, still waiting. One night, during a thunderstorm, she lights a single candle and opens the chest. She holds the sword, kneeling, eyes closed. Scout. To carry this is to carry them all, she whispers. I will not forget. And so she doesn't. And because of her, neither do you. The way of the quiet blade, the sound of one step. There's a sound many forget to notice. It is not the clash of swords, nor the drums of war. It is the soft step of a samurai entering the day with intention. It begins before sunrise, in a quiet room. The swords have long since rested, the war banners long taken down. But the step, it still echoes. In a modern apartment in Osaka, in a small dojo in Chicago, in the heart of a nurse preparing for her shift at dawn. It begins with presence, a bow to the morning, a deep breath, an invisible armor, not of steel, but of patience, discipline, kindness. This is the sound of the quiet blade. The last 7 virtues, the warrior code of Bushido, was never just for samurai, was never only for war. Its 7 principles endure, like stones along a mountain path, weathered but unmoving. And so now, softly, let us walk through them one final time. Let them settle into your own life like falling cherry blossoms. 1. GI. Integrity. Righteousness. To do what is right, even when no one sees. To stand, even when the winds howl. To be the same person in the storm as in the calm. You carry this when you keep your word. 2. Wick. Courage. Not the roar of lions, but the soft step forward into fear. The hand that still opens the letter. The voice that still speaks the truth. You carry this when you try, knowing you may fail. 3. Kin. Compassion. A blade that is never drawn unless to protect. A strength that kneels beside the wounded. The embrace offered to an enemy once fallen. You carry this when you forgive. 4. Respect the bow before the duel. The tea poured without a word. The silence held because it is needed. You carry this when you listen. 5. Makoto. Honesty, sincerity. To speak not for applause, but for clarity. To be transparent even when it costs. To live without shadow. You carry this when you admit the truth even to yourself. Signal. Honor, not medals, not legacy, but sleeping each night without regret, living each day in alignment with what you value. You carry this when you say no to what dishonors your spirit. 7. Chigi. Loyalty. Not blind allegiance, K, but devotion to people, causes, and callings that nourish the world, remaining rooted, even when tempted to drift. You carry this when you show up, again and again. These are not only for those who wore 2 swords, they are for anyone who seeks to live with clarity. The ritual of presence. Let me now share with you a gentle, ancient-inspired ritual adapted for your world today. A modern Goma fire of the soul. You may practice it in silence. Simply listen as you drift into sleep. The modern samurai morning wake before the noise. Even if only 10 minutes early. Let the stillness guide you. Prepare one simple thing with care. Tea, clothes, your bag. Do it without distraction. It is your morning kata. Bow to the day. You may not kneel, but nod your head slightly, intentionally. Mark the beginning of the new. Move with rhythm. Walk as though you carry a blade not for violence, but for memory. Your posture is a legacy. Speak with economy. You need not fill the air. Let your words cut with purpose. Let your silence calm others. Offer one act of kindness, a smile, a held door, sincere compliment. No one needs to know you are practicing Bushido, but you will know. End the day in reflection. Write a line. Sit still, breathe, ask, did I live with honor today? If yes, bow. If no, bow again. Try tomorrow. That is the way. The sword dreams, and so now, as our long story draws to a close, I ask you to imagine a single sword, wrapped in cloth, resting in a chest made by hand, kept in a quiet room where no one boasts, no one fights, no one even speaks, but still, the sword waits. It waits not for battle, but for memory. It dreams of pine forests, of riders in mist, of a teacher's hand correcting a child's brushstroke, of a woman kneeling in tea, of a man who bows before entering his father's graveyard, of a child who opens the chest, not with excitement, but with reverence. That sword may rest in you now. Perhaps not a weapon, but a presence, a calm strength, a quiet blade. Sleep, samurai, and now, traveler of time, close your eyes. Let the pine trees sway softly behind your mind. Let the bamboo leaves whisper lullabies. Let the candles of temples flicker behind your breath. You have walked beside generals and poets, monks and mothers, daughters and ghosts. You have studied, bowed, wept, remembered. You have carried their legacy, not as armor, but as a soul. You are not a warrior of blood. You are a warrior of being. Now rest. The sword is clean. The scroll is closed. Sleep, samurai. You have honored the path, and the path honors you. The moon and the war fan, hidden weapons in unseen ways. Relax now. Let your breath slow. Tonight, we follow the quieter tools of the samurai. Not the katana, but the fan, the short blade, and the power of the unseen. The war fan. Tessin, the moon, is high over a moonlit road. A traveler, cloaked in the crest of his lord, walks alone. He carries no sword, only a folded fan tucked in his sleeve. But this is no ordinary fan. This is a tessin, an iron war fan used by samurai for self-defense when blades were forbidden. In times of court diplomacy or travel through temple lands where swords were not allowed, the tessin served as a discreet weapon of skill, could deflect blades, even strike with deadly force. One famed general, Takada Shingen, is said to have deflected a spear with a tessin during a sudden attack, then commanded the battlefield without ever drawing steel. The fan, a symbol of grace, a hidden blade. Skamizu, the cane that cuts. There is an old man who walks the market streets of Edo, bent at the back, slow in step. He leans heavily on a walking stick. Children smile at him, merchants bow, but none suspect that the cane is hollow. Inside is a sword. His is a shikomizu, a concealed blade inside a cane. Used by undercover operatives and ronin alike, it allowed one to pass as a pilgrim, a poet, or an elder. In peace, it was support. In danger, precision. Kenzashi, the hairpin that strikes. In Kyoto's pleasure quarters, a woman kneels before a lacquered mirror, adjusting her hair. Delicate hands twist silk. A golden Kenzashi hairpin slides into place. Tease, but this is not merely an ornament. Some Anabageisha, female samurai, wore sharpened Kenzashi that could pierce flesh with a flick of the wrist. It was elegance and protection. One record from 1639 describes a woman defending herself with such a hairpin against a would-be attacker on a rain-slick street, surviving only because of her silent weapon. Symes, strength or silk. Yumi, the sacred bow now. Walk with me to a clearing in the forest. The morning is misted. The world is quiet. And in that stillness, a single arrow flies. The Yumi, the longbow of the samurai, was once more feared than the katana. At over 2 meters tall, it was wielded with an asymmetrical grip. Samurai trained for years in Kaido, the way of the bow, where each shot was a spiritual ritual. Tia, you did not shoot to hit. Tia, shot to understand yourself. One archer, Nasu no Yoichi, fired a single arrow at a distant fan balanced on a boat mast during the Genpei War. He struck it clean and became legend. Kusarigama, the chain and the crescent. And then there were those who mastered the art of misdirection. Kusarigama, a sickle chained to a weight, was used by samurai retainers and farmers alike. The wielder would swing the chain in a wide arc, ensnaring the enemy's blade, then strike with the sickle's curved steel. Fast, unpredictable, silent. One story from the 16th century tells of a lone guard who held off 3 bandits using only a kusarigama, his feet silent on tatami, chain slicing through torchlight like moonlight through water. He did not win, but he survived. And so, the silent tools remain. Not all samurai fought with noise. Some fought with fans, canes, hairpins, arrows launched in silence, chains that curved like water. They fought not always to kill, but to protect, to deflect, to confuse, to control. Tonight, let these unseen tools rest in your imagination. Let your mind drift to the silent strikes, the folds of robes, the whisper of wind through pine. The world is loud, but the samurai, in their wisdom, knew this truth, that sometimes the softest weapon is the most powerful. The ghost and the blade. The pine trees whispered louder than the wind. That's what the old priest said about the temple atop Mount Osar, the mountain of fear, a place still believed to be a gateway to the spirit world in northern Japan. Pilgrims come here to speak to the dead, to offer food to spirits, to listen to what still lingers. And among them walk the ghosts of samurai. Our story tonight begins with one such spirit, a man whose sword no longer glints in moonlight, but whose presence still flickers along the forest paths. The silent rider of Sendai. The year is 1611, just after the great earthquake struck the coast of Sendai. Crops failed, homes collapsed. But it was not hunger that chilled the villagers. It was the sound hooves. Each night, the rhythmic clack-clack of a lone horse echoed through the valley. A single rider, no torch, no destination. And every morning, no tracks. No one dared speak his name, but the older villagers whispered of a retainer, Masuda Ritsunobu, samurai to the Date clan, who died in disgrace, his seppuku incomplete after his Kishikunin II hesitated and fled. It is said his soul wandered endlessly, still bowing before an absent lord, still waiting for a clean death. To this day, in the hills outside Sendai, some still hear it, clack, clack, the sound of regret on horseback. The death ritual. To understand why such spirits linger, you must understand the ritual of death. For the samurai, death was not chaos, it was ceremony. When one performed seppuku, the ritual suicide, everything was arranged. A white kimono, symbol of purity. A wakizashi blade, placed on a small stand. A written poem, called a jize, resting nearby. And most importantly, a kishikunin, a trusted second, tasked with ending the suffering swiftly. The act was not brutal. It was sacred, like a final tea ceremony. Even if one's head were to be suddenly cut off, he should still be able to perform one more action with certainty. Akua Kua. Imagine the stillness of that room, the silence, the breath held by every witness, and now imagine, centuries later, that silence breaks. Because some say, where the ritual was interrupted, the spirit does not rest, and those who failed their last rite linger. The sword of the dead in an old museum in Nara. There lies a blade encased in polished glass. It is said to have belonged to Okabe Moritaka, a retainer who served the Imagawa clan in the late 1500s. According to the curator's handwritten notes, Moritaka was ordered to commit seppuku after being falsely accused of betrayal. But something went wrong. The Kishikunin, his own son, couldn't strike. He froze, and so Moritaka bled to death, slowly, eyes fixed on his child. The sword on display. Tao was the son's, the one he dropped. Museum staff report that its case fogs unexpectedly. Lights flicker. One guard resigned after hearing whispers, always just behind him, whenever he passed the blade. Father, I waited. That's what he claimed it said. Yurei. Ghosts in white robes. The Japanese spirit is known as a yurei, a soul that has not found peace. They wear white, the color of death in Japanese funerals. Their long black hair flows down, uncut, wild. Their feet never touch the ground. Many yurei are women, lost lovers, betrayed wives, daughters wronged by cruel lords. But some were warriors. One shrine in Kyoto holds a faded banner from the 15th century, inscribed with the name Suma no Akiyama, a samurai who perished defending a retreating army. His body was never recovered. Monks at the shrine claim that every year, during the Oban festival, an armored figure stands beneath the torii gate at midnight, head bowed, unmoving, as if still waiting for the order to charge. Then, as dawn breaks, he vanishes. Temple bells and empty boots. There is a temple near Kamakura, Jamuje, where the names of fallen retainers are still chanted during evening prayers. Locals tell of an older monk who kept finding sandal prints outside the prayer room, always clean, always pointed inward. And yet, no one had walked there. Finally, during the lantern ceremony, he stayed behind. He lit incense. He waited. When the last bell rang, he saw them. 6 men, no faces, only armor. In silence, they bowed toward the altar, and then were gone. The monk never questioned it again. He simply set 6 extra cups of tea each Oban season. Not all ghosts seek revenge. Some simply remember. There's a path in Nagano, shaded by cedar trees, called the Samurai's Walk. It's said that if you walk it just after rain, you might feel someone fall into step beside you. Not threatening, not cruel, just a presence, a rhythm, as if someone walks with you, protecting you, guiding you. Reflection. Death is not the end for the samurai. Death was never a failure. It was a passage, a final offering, a boat to the invisible. And those who died with dignity were said to protect their descendants. Watch over shrines, whisper wisdom in dreams. But those who died with regret, they became wind on stone, riders in moonlight, echoes through paper screens. Their stories are not meant to frighten you. They are meant to remind you that honor and memory never truly vanish. Wait. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine a forest path, lanterns floating on the river, armor left folded at a temple's door, a blade wrapped in silk, a poem written in soft brushstrokes. I leave no scar upon the earth, but I carried my vow like a flame through the fog. Sleep now. The ghosts are not restless. They simply wanted you to remember. The brush and the blood final poems of the samurai. The candle is low. It casts soft light over rice paper, folded with care on a low wooden table. The inkstone is ready. The brush, fine and deliberate, waits beside it. In the corner of the room sits a man. His posture is perfect. His breathing, quiet. He wears a white kimono, the same color worn by the dead in Japanese funeral rites. He is not afraid. He is preparing. Not for war, but for a final act of creation. The Jizei, a death poem. For the samurai, death was not an interruption. It was a moment to meet with clear eyes and a still hand. To die without expressing one's final thought was to vanish incomplete. But to write a poem, a single, graceful offering, was to die like a falling leaf, noticed, but not mourned in panic. The tradition came from Zen Buddhism. Death is impermanence. Beauty is fleeting. To name it, briefly, in 17 syllables or a few short lines, was to master one's end. And so, they wrote, "Let me tell you a true story. In the year 1703, after exacting their legendary revenge, the 47 Ronin prepared to die by seppuku. They had avenged their lord Asano Naganori by killing the corrupt official, Kira Yoshinaka. But their revenge was against the shogunate's laws, and so their final act was not a battle. It was a ceremony. They bathed, they dressed in white, and before drawing their blades, they wrote death poems, quiet, elegant reflections on life, snow, wind, fading seasons. It's only a few lines each. One Ronin wrote, "Falling snow, I pass silently into the other world." And then, with honor, they knelt in rows, drew their blades, and passed with dignity. In another time, another castle, a samurai named Kusunoki Masashage prepared to die at the Battle of Minatagawa in 1336. He knew his army would lose. He knew the emperor's orders were impossible, but he obeyed them anyway. Before charging into certain death, he looked up at the clouds. He took brush to paper. His poem was short, but heavy. Would that I had 7 lives to give for my country. It was not a complaint. It was a promise. Each death poem was unique. Some were sorrowful, some defiant, some like flickering lanterns, just enough to light the space before death entered. In the 1800s, during the Satsuma Rebellion, Seigo Takamori, the last true samurai, was defeated by imperial forces. Wounded, surrounded, he retreated into a cave on Shiroyama Hill. He had once believed in the Meiji Emperor. Build the new government. But when it became corrupt, he rebelled not for power, but for principle. As the final soldiers approached, he wrote no long speech, no letter of anger. Only a haiku. Even the warrior's heart, broken in quiet twilight, bleeds with autumn light. Then he performed seppuku. By the time his body was found, it was still upright, eyes forward, peaceful. Not all who wrote death poems died in war. Some wrote theirs in old age. Others, on quiet nights at temples, monks, poets, retired generals. Because for the samurai, the final breath was not a scream. It was a verse. One anonymous poem, carved into the beam of a ruined estate after a fire, read, "This house, like my life, was built of paper and wind." It is believed to have been written by a Ronin before taking his own life. No name, just that poem. The beam was saved, hung in a tea house in Edo. Travelers bowed when they entered, not to honor sadness, but to respect clarity. There's something soothing in that, isn't there? The idea that even at the very edge of life, a warrior could choose peace, could choose poetry, to meet the end with ink on fingers instead of fear in the chest, to leave not a wound, but a whisper. Now, imagine this. You are sitting in a quiet room, a brush in hand. Outside, the wind moves through pine trees. Atala. You've lived well, not without mistakes, Akata, but with intention. And now, rather than fear, you feel only stillness. So you write a final line, not for anyone else, just for the wind. The blade rests, and in that silence, I bloom. The wind was sharp that morning. It pressed against a ridge like a memory returning home. Mist clung to the mountain as though it too were waiting to see what would happen. And beneath that mist, in armor weathered by time, stood a man named Torie Mototada. He was not young. He was not expected to win. He was simply asked to hold the line. The Castle of Fire. Torii Mototada, 1600. The year was 1600. Year, and all of Japan trembled on the edge of war. 2 powerful clans, one led by Tokugawa Ieyasu, the other by Ishida Mitsunari, were preparing for a battle that would decide the future of the nation. Kikua's forces would later win at Sekigahara, uniting Japan under a single rule. But before that victory came a sacrifice. Torii Mototada, a loyal retainer to Tokugawa, was tasked with defending Fushimi Castle, a small stronghold near Kyoto. He knew the enemy outnumbered him over 40-1. He knew that reinforcements would not come. He knew this would be his grave. And still, he stayed. Before the gates were breached, Mototada sat calmly in the central hall and wrote a long letter to his son. It was not filled with fear or farewell. It was filled with pride. It is not the way of the warrior to be shamed and avoid death, even under circumstances that are not particularly important. He fought with precision, grace, and fire. For 10 days, the castle held. And when the walls finally fell, Mototada performed seppuku in the flames. His delay gave Ieyasu the time he needed to gather his army, changing the fate of Japan. Mototada did not live to see it, but he became its reason. The gatekeeper, Sanada Yukimura, 15 years later. Another samurai took his last breath in the heart of Osaka. Sanada Yukimura, known as the Crimson Demon of War, was a master tactician, fiercely loyal to the Toyotomi clan, was famed for defying overwhelming odds with elegance and brilliance. During the siege of Osaka, Yukimura commanded a small garrison tasked with holding back Tokugawa's full military force, as enemy cannons roared and flames engulfed the outer defenses. Yukimura's men dug trenches and fought with the force of a much larger army. Every strike, every charge was measured, precise. They called him the #1 warrior in Japan. In his final moments, exhausted and wounded, he sat beneath a pine tree, his armor cracked, his sword chipped. When the enemy found him, he bowed his head and whispered, "I am Sanada Yukimura. I am tired. Please, take my head." He died with no regret, only resolve. Even Tokugawa Ieyasu reportedly admired his courage, saying, "A man like that should have been my ally." The River Duel, Miyamoto Musashi vs. Sasaki Kajiro, 1612. Though this was not a battlefield, it was still a last stand, a duel where only one would walk away. Miyamoto Musashi, rough and unrefined, carried 2 wooden swords. Sasaki Kajiro, elegant and lethal, carried a thin, graceful blade he called the drying pole, so long it danced through the air like a ribbon of death. The duel took place on a narrow island at dawn, surrounded by water and gulls. Musashi arrived late, intentionally. He carved a bakken, a wooden sword, from an oar as he rowed to shore. It wasn't about disrespect. It was psychology. Kujiro, furious, attacked with lightning speed. Musashi.com, calculating, brutal, struck once, fast and high. Kujiro fell, defeated. 8 was Musashi's last true duel. And though he won, he walked away in silence, knowing he had faced a master, one whose name would be remembered even in death. It's a peasant's blade. Amakusa, Sure, 1638. Some last stands are not made by generals or noble lords, but by those born into fire. Amakusa Sure, a teenage Christian samurai, led a rebellion of peasants, outcasts, and converts against the Tokugawa shogunate in the Shimabara Rebellion. Their weapons were crude, their armor pieced together. Their banner carried not a clan's sigil, but a cross. They were trapped in Hera Castle, surrounded by over 125,000 troops. Inside, only 37,000 stood with Sure. He was just 17 years old. They held the castle for months, despite starvation, disease, and cannon fire. But the shogun's army breached the walls. Everyone was slaughtered, every man, woman, and child. Sure's head was placed on a pike, displayed publicly to break the will of future rebels. But his last stand became legend, carried, echoed into the Christian underground, whispered in prayers, hidden in caves, carved into secret symbols beneath floorboards. A samurai, not of birth, but of spirit. When defeat becomes immortality, each of these samurai knew they would not survive. They did not expect a rescue. They did not crave monuments. They simply believed that how you die is how you live, distilled. And so they stood against armies, against fear, against fire, hunger, betrayal, and sometimes history itself. They fought alone, and because of that, they were never forgotten. Bow. Picture this. You are standing on a quiet ridge. Lo, 1,000 soldiers march. Their banners flutter. Their voices roar. But up here, you are alone and calm. K. You tie your helmet. You adjust your blade. You breathe, not with panic, but with purpose. You are not afraid to fall, 'cause your stand is your offering. Though my sword may shatter, though my armor may burn, let my name drift like smoke into the valley below. Sleep now, warrior of thought. The last stand has been made, and the silence remains. The samurai and the sea island warriors, naval battles, and shipwreck legends, the salt wine clan, Murakami pirates in the inland sea of Japan, where the waves dance between the islands of Honshu, Shikaku, and Kyushu. The Murakami ruled the waters. Tia, they called themselves naval samurai, not pirates, though, to outsiders, there was little difference. Their armor was lacquered to resist salt spray, their bows wrapped in oil-soaked cloth to keep strings dry. They carried the daishu at their hips, even at sea. By day, they escorted merchant ships for a price. By night, they would raid those who had not paid. Their skill lay not only in battle, but in navigation, threading their ships through narrow straits where larger fleets could not follow. In 1576, during the war between Oda Nobunaga and the Mori clan, Kami used small, fast boats to harass Oda's massive ships, striking from the mist and vanishing into the maze of islands. A samurai on land might charge once in a lifetime. The Murakami charged with the tides, again and again. The Mongol winds, kamikaze of 1274 and 1281. Travel back now to the 13th century, when the sea brought not only trade, but invasion. Kublai Khan, ruler of the Yuan dynasty, sent fleets of Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers to conquer Japan. The samurai met them on the shores of Kyushu, battling ferociously with bow, spear, and sword. But the true defender of Japan was not steel. It was the wind. In both 1274 and 1281, massive storms struck the Mongol fleets. Ships splintered against the rocks. Masts cracked like bones. The survivors were cut down by waiting samurai along the beaches. The Japanese called these storms kamikaze, divine winds sent by the gods. Along the shores of Hakata Bay, divers still recover pieces of those fleets, iron arrowheads, shards of helmets, and in one case, a sword still bound to the remains of its owner, buried in sand for over 700 years. The island Ronin Tsushima's defenders in 1419, Korean forces landed on the island of Tsushima, a narrow, forested land between Korea and Japan. The attack was meant to stop Japanese pirates, whack, from raiding Korean coasts. The samurai on Tsushima were few. Most had no lord, only their families and their fishing boats. But when the invaders came, they fought with everything: boughs from the cliffs, spears from the shallows, even burning fishing nets to block the enemy's ships. They could not hold forever. But their resistance was fierce enough to force a negotiated withdrawal, preserving the island's people. The sea had been their shield, their escape, and their grave. The ship that never came home, Kuki Yoshitaka, in 1600. During the Battle of Sekigahara, the fate of Japan balanced not just on the land, but at sea. Admiral Kuki Yoshitaka commanded the Western Army's fleet. He was a samurai of the Sian, expert in ship-to-ship combat. His vessels bristled with cannon, his men armed with muskets and bows. But the tides of loyalty shifted. His own son sided with Tokugawa Ieyasu, the enemy. When defeat became inevitable, Yoshitaka anchored his flagship offshore, set his armor in order, and performed seppuku on the deck, facing the open horizon. The ship drifted for hours, silent except for the slap of waves against the hull, till another vessel approached and found him seated upright, as if still commanding his fleet. Shipwreck on Seto Island. There is an old story from the early Edo period, told in fishing villages along the coast of Seto Island. A small trading ship, carrying a samurai retainer back to his lord, was caught in a winter storm. The mast snapped, the hole cracked, and the crew abandoned hope. The samurai removed his armor to avoid drowning, but kept his katana bound to his back. He told the crew, "If we reach shore, I will walk with you. If we sink, I will stand before you in the next world." Only half survived. Weeks later, the sea returned the samurai's body, still clutching his sword. The villagers buried him high on the cliff above the harbor, where the wind forever smells of salt. Fishermen still leave offerings there before sailing. Why the sea matters to the samurai. The sea was not simply a road or a battlefield. It was a teacher. It taught patience, waiting for the right wind. It taught humility. One wave could undo the bravest plan. It taught adaptability. No warrior could control the tide, only ride it. And for the samurai, it was a mirror. The water reflected both their face and their fate. Some stood on the deck, ready for boarding. Some fought with the spray in their eyes. Some sank, armor pulling them into the deep. And some came home with salt-stiffened banners snapping in the wind. It's closing the sails. The deck beneath you is quiet now. The anchor drops into the dark water. The lanterns glow along the rail. In the distance, the sound of waves against a rocky shore. The samurai's journey did not end at the coastline. The sea was another battlefield, another shrine, another home. And as you drift into sleep, let the sound of the tide carry you back to a time when a warrior might fight for his lord by sword or by sail. The mask and the oath, samurai theater, ritual armor, and the hidden self. The mask is still. Its surface is lacquered black, with streaks of red around the jaw. Its lips curl slightly upward, not in joy, but in silence. Stares from the corner of the room, resting on a velvet cloth beside a samurai's armor. This is the mempo, the half-mask once worn by samurai into battle. But it is more than protection. It is persona, the mempo, a warrior's second face. In the smoke and confusion of war, a samurai's face was often obscured. Dust, sweat, fear, determination. But with the mempo, the mask spoke first. Some were shaped like demons, to frighten enemies before the blade was ever drawn. Others bore serene expressions, stoic smiles, furrowed brows, as if the samurai had become emotionless. They were not disguises. They were declarations. One mask found in Sendai, dated to the late 1500s, bore a twisted snarl and narrow, slitted eyes. It belonged to a commander known for never speaking during battle. He wore no clan emblem, no bright color, just the mask. After his death, his enemies still reported seeing his shape on the battlefield, just a dark helmet, a snarling face, and silence. No theater, the stage of stillness. Now we turn away from the battlefield and walk into a darkened wooden room. Incense rises, lanterns flicker. You are seated on the tatami floor, watching Japan's oldest dramatic art, tronized by samurai lords and steeped in mystery. On stage, the actors move with agonizing slowness. Every gesture matters. Every step is a word. The masks they wear, some representing ghosts, others gods, do not change expression, and yet, somehow, they seem alive. No was not entertainment. It was spiritual rehearsal. Samurai would attend performances before battle, not to be distracted, but to reflect, to remember the transience of life, to meditate on death, to see themselves in the ghost of a fallen warrior or the face of a mourning woman. In one famous no play, a samurai returns as a spirit to tell his final battle from beyond the grave. He wears the mask of a hero, but his words are filled with regret. The audience listens, not for thrills, but for stillness. Kabuto, the helmet of identity. Not all masks covered the face. Some sat proudly atop the head. The kabuto, or samurai helmet, was often adorned with extravagant crests, antlers, moons, dragons, horns, each a message, each a myth. One general might wear a golden sunburst to represent divine favor. Another, the horns of a stag, symbolizing strength and longevity. Perhaps the most famous was Date Masamun, the one-eyed dragon of the north. His kabuto bore a crescent moon, gleaming above his helmet like a blade of night. He had lost his right eye to illness, but wore no mask to hide it. Instead, he embraced the myth. He became the moon, and in doing so, became immortal in the eyes of friend and foe alike. Ritual armor, dressing the spirit when a samurai prepared for battle. The act of dressing was not casual. It was ceremony. Each piece, inner robes, armored sleeves, the breastplate, the greaves, was added slowly, often in silence or with soft chanting. He was not just preparing to fight. He was stepping into symbol. There are records of samurai who, facing certain death, would dress in their finest armor, layered with family crests and shimmering silk, not for glory, but to meet death as an offering. One daimyo, before riding into a hopeless battle, was asked why he wore such beautiful armor. He replied, "Because if I must die today, let the gods know who I am." The mask within, but the most powerful mask, was not lacquered, not painted, not tied to the face. It was the one the samurai carried within. The calm expression held during a funeral, the bow before a duel, the stillness while kneeling in front of one's lord. This mask was built over years, through training, hardship, silence, and restraint. Samurai were taught from childhood to conceal emotion, to shape it, to forge it like steel, but not to destroy it, only to direct it. In doing so, they became not less human, but more. The final bow now. The mask has been removed. The play has ended. The armor returned to its stand. But in your mind, perhaps, something lingers. A face, not smiling, not sad, just still. A posture, not stiff, not casual, just steady. A presence that does not demand attention, but commands it silently. This is the legacy of the mask, not to hide, but to reveal. Under the mask, I found no stranger, only the face I was meant to wear, wandering blades. The Ronin who walked alone, he walked with no destination, single bundle across his back, a sword at his hip, and on his face, no expression at all. People stepped aside when he passed, not out of fear, but out of unease. There was something different in the way he moved, to calm, to quiet. They whispered behind him, "Ronin." What is a Ronin? In feudal Japan, loyalty was a samurai's soul. He lived to serve his daimyo, his lord. He received a stipend, land, food, and protection. In return, he offered his blade, his life, his name. But when that master died, by war, execution, or disgrace, the samurai was left adrift. If he did not perform seppuku to follow his lord into death, he became Ronin, a man without a master, a man without a home, a man without purpose. Some became mercenaries. Others took to teaching, writing, guarding travelers, even farming. Some turned to crime. Many simply walked, from province to province, temple to temple, seeking not revenge nor glory, but something else. The man who refused power, Musashi. Perhaps the most famous Ronin was Miyamoto Musashi. We've spoken of his duels, his victories, his carved wooden sword. But what made Musashi truly remarkable was not that he won over 60 duels. It's that he refused to serve any master. He was offered positions by lords, shoguns, even the Tokugawa family. Each time, he bowed and walked away. He traveled from town to town, sleeping in inns, caves, and forests. He wrote poetry. He painted ink-washed scrolls. He taught students who asked nothing in return. And at the end of his life, he entered a cave called Rigando, where he meditated, wrote the Book of 5 Rings, and died seated, sword across his lap, a Ronin to the very end, rootless but grounded. The Avenger, Jishi, Yoshio. But not all ronin wandered aimlessly. Some waited. After their master, Lord Asano, was forced to commit seppuku, Jishi, Yoshio, and 46 others became ronin. They did not attack, did not rage. They scattered, disguised themselves, became monks, drunkards, shopkeepers. For over a year, they waited until their enemy, Kira, dropped his guard. Then, in a single night, they struck, executing him with precision and calm. Afterward, they did not flee. They turned themselves in, wrote poems, sat in silence, and were granted the right to perform seppuku with honor. They were ronin, but they were also samurai still. The lonely teacher, Jasui Tadorner. Not every ronin left behind blood or a legend. Some left behind words. Yasui Tadanor was once a mid-ranking samurai. When his lord fell to political scandal, Yasui refused to die. Instead, he moved to a small village and offered sword lessons for a bowl of rice a day. He never carried his blade in public. He taught more haiku than he did cuts. He told his students, "A sword is not for killing. It is for cutting through one's own pride." No paintings of him survive. No famous duels. It's just a tiny gravestone, now moss-covered, beside a grove of bamboo. But villagers still sweep it clean. What it meant to wander to be a ronin was not just a status. It was a condition. Carried your sword, yes, but you also carried grief, shame, freedom, solitude. Some walked to escape, others to understand. The ronin became poets, pilgrims, ghosts. They walked roads where no welcome awaited them. They bowed to no lord but the wind, and yet their footprints remained. On temple steps, on mountain passes, in the soft hush between shrine bells. It's the last ronin in the Meiji Restoration. As the samurai class was dissolved, thousands of former warriors became ronin overnight. Some resisted, taking up arms in doomed rebellions. Others laid down their swords and became policemen, teachers, or vanished into the countryside. One such man, Takeda Sheiji, a former castle guard, was found in 1879 living as a gardener behind a Kyoto monastery. He still rose at dawn, still tied his hakama neatly, still bowed to his ancestors. When asked if he missed the life of a samurai, he smiled gently and said, "I do not miss the armor. I miss the silence before the strike." Final reflections. The ronin was never a villain. He was not broken. He was in between, not quite lost, not quite found. And perhaps, in our own moments of uncertainty, in our own wanderings, we carry a bit of that same spirit. No master, no map. Still, I walk, and the wind does not turn me. Sleep now, traveler. You are not alone in your wandering. 1,000 quiet footsteps walk beside you. Be ronin, keep watch. The fire and the garden. How samurai cultivated beauty and peace. The storm has passed. There is no war today. No army to march. No duel to prepare. You wake early, before sunrise. Your home is quiet. The floor cool beneath your bare feet. And you go, not to the armory, but to the garden. The garden as battlefield of the spirit. In Kyoto, near old temple walls, lie gardens designed not for growing food, but for growing the mind. Karasunsui, dry rock gardens, were cultivated by monks and samurai alike. No flowers, no colors, just sand, gravel, and a few carefully placed stones. The act of raking the gravel was meditation. Each pattern symbolized wind, water, emptiness, and time. One samurai wrote, "I arranged the stones not to control them, but to understand myself between them." When a warrior could not sleep, he would rake. When he lost a friend in battle, he would rake. When he waited for a letter that might never come, he would rake. No answers were spoken, only shapes drawn and erased again. The fire and the hearth. At the center of the samurai home was not the sword rack, but the earate, a sunken hearth where coals burned slowly all day. Over this flame, tea was prepared. soup stirred, letters read by firelight. The samurai did not speak often here, but in the glow of that fire, stories were passed. Children listened. Mothers brewed warmth. And sometimes old warriors stared into the flame and said nothing at all. They didn't need to. The fire carried their thoughts. Calligraphy room on the second floor of many homes, past narrow halls and paper doors, was a small alcove bare except for a single hanging scroll and a vase. This was the tokonoma, a place for poetry, a place for restraint. Samurai trained in Shado, the way of the brush. To write a single kanji, you needed balance, breath, intention. If your hand trembled, the truth would show. Some samurai wrote battle reports, others wrote poems. Some simply copied old wisdom again and again until their hand moved like water. One poem, often repeated by a general near retirement, read, "Ink dries faster when the heart does not chase the pen." It's the art of bonsai and sword the blade, and the bonsai had more in common than most think. Both required trimming. Both demanded patience. Both held the power of tension, of held-back strength. A single miscut, and the tree's shape would break. A single flawed strike, and the sword would fail. Some samurai kept miniature pines on their writing desks, some over 100 years old, passed down like swords. To care for a bonsai was not to control nature. It was to dialogue with it. Its branch bent like a memory, its leaf, a breath, held just a moment longer. The ink warrior, Hosokawa Tadaki. One of the most refined daimyo of the Sengoku period was Hosokawa Tadayoki, a samurai who studied the tea ceremony, composed poetry, and painted soft landscapes. He fought in dozens of battles, led troops, took heads. In his later years, he built a small retreat in the mountains of Kyushu. There, he wrote calligraphy, practiced tea under the moonlight. Ken tended to his moss garden with the same precision he once applied to battlefield formations. When asked if he missed war, he replied, "No, but I miss the silence before it begins." The Garden of Farewell in the city of Kanazawa. A garden named Kenrokuin was designed by a samurai clan, not for lords, but for reflection, winding paths, bridges over still ponds. Trees shaped not by nature alone, but by mindful hands. Samurai would walk it in the evenings, not with haste, not with armor. They would pause on the stone bridges, look into the water, and see themselves. No helmet, no title. Just a man, breathing, alive. You are in the garden now. Tonight, there is no war, no messenger knocking, no sword to sharpen. Only the gentle pull of a bamboo ladle, the scent of charcoal and plum blossoms, the crunch of gravel beneath your steps. You carry your discipline with you, but you set your weapon down. The garden needs nothing from you, and yet you are made whole in its company. The blade sleeps, but the hand still shapes the wind. Sleep now, peaceful warrior, let your breath fall like petals. The fire is low. The ink has dried, and your garden is watching over you. The temple scroll, rituals, spirituality. In the samurai's inner world before dawn breaks, long before any sword is lifted, a lone samurai kneels before a scroll. His armor is not yet tied, his face not yet painted with war, but already he is preparing, not his stance, but his soul. He bows once, twice, then breathes in the incense from a burner passed down by his grandfather. The day will be brutal. In this moment, he is not a killer. He is a monk with a blade. The influence of Zen samurai were not merely warriors. They were students of silence. Zen Buddhism offered them something no strategy could, the discipline of the mind. Zen did not teach elaborate rituals. It taught stillness, breath, detachment. Many samurai took up zazen, seated meditation, before and after battle. They would sit cross-legged in bare rooms, facing a wall, eyes half open, spine upright. not chasing thoughts, not forcing peace, simply being present. One master told his pupil, if you wish to strike with clarity, learn first how to sit with emptiness. The water ritual. Mizagi. Some samurai purified themselves with mizagi, a Shinto cleansing ritual. Standing under a waterfall, freezing and unrelenting, they would chant prayers as water crashed over their heads. It was not pain they sought, but clarity, to strip away fear, to clean the spirit before blood was spilled. Some carried small white ofuda, paper charms, tucked in their armor, marked with sacred texts to protect the heart and guide the soul in death. A samurai did not believe he would live forever. He prepared, always, to die well. The prayer scrolls and temple bells in ancient Kyoto. Monks recorded the names of samurai who had died with honor. Their names were written on scrolls and read aloud during morning prayers, alongside the ringing of temple bells. Some temples, like Ingakuji in Kamakura, were founded specifically for warriors seeking peace after battle. Samurai would climb the temple steps after war, not to boast, but to ask for forgiveness, not always from others, but from the divine, and from themselves. Short prayer, found in one such temple, read, forgive the blade that cuts, if the hand that holds it seeks truth. The sword as spirit. To a samurai, the sword was not simply a tool, it was kami, or divine. Forging a katana was a sacred act. The blacksmith purified himself before beginning, chanted while hammering, bathed the blade in sacred water. Samurai would offer their sword at family altars, lay it before the Buddha, or wrap it in silk during times of mourning. Before a duel, some would whisper into the sword's curve, not to curse their enemy, but to speak their intent. Guide my hand, do not shame my soul. It's a path to death, a peaceful exit when a samurai prepared for seppuku, ritual suicide. They often did so with ritual precision. The room was cleaned, incense burned, white robes worn. Poems were written, final words, called jezi no ku. Not angry, not desperate, but accepting, even beautiful. One famous poem read, like dew on a leaf, I fall, but oh, the morning sun that rises still. Afterward, a trusted friend, the Kishakunin, stood ready to offer a swift, respectful end. It was not cruelty, it was mercy, a final act of loyalty to ease the soul's journey. Moto Sunitomo. In the early 1700s, a samurai named Yamamoto Tenitomo retired to a mountain temple after his lord died. He never fought another battle, never drew his sword again. Instead, he wrote. His thoughts became hagaku, one of the most profound texts on Bushido. He wrote, meditation on inevitable death should be performed daily when one's mind is calm. There is nothing one cannot achieve. Sunitomo lived in obscurity, but his words still guide soldiers, monks, and seekers centuries later, because he understood the greatest sword is the one that shapes your own soul. It's the temple in you, and now, as you lie in the dark, perhaps you too feel the need to center yourself, not to prepare for war, but to quiet the noise, to return to your breath, to offer stillness to a day that asks too much. This is your temple. No roof needed, no incense required, only your awareness and your willingness to bow to time, to truth, to your own heart. I carry no scroll, I chant no name, but in this breath I find the whole of heaven. Sleep now, pilgrim. The path has been walked. The temple door is open, and inside, the flame still flickers softly,